possibly imagine running in a deck like this.
Yeah, and the game is underway, and we do have the Scoia'tael deck going first. Want to point out the Necromancy in the hand here as well for PorkBelly. PorkBelly with the Necromancy. Why Necromancy? Well, we know how good the not 4 provision, just the bronze cards are in this deck. And Necromancy can be used on something like a Seer. Then you pull the orbs from your graveyard, and then you instantly use the orbs onto the Seer. But look at this. Kams, not messing around. We know Kams. It looks like we're in for a quick one, Christo. And honestly, I'm ready. I do love a bit of speed Gwent, and Kams is the king of speed Gwent. Often I see people playing against him falling into the trap of trying to match Kams at speed Gwent, and often it doesn't work out for them. So I'd like to see PorkBelly roping a little bit more, because he's just playing into Kams' comfort zone, and Kams is the king of jamming.
You know what? I think that's so interesting, because you like watch a game like poker, people playing it face to face, and the little tells and how they play and getting into the mind games a little bit. But I think it's so interesting here because the same thing applies. Like you said, Speci, if Kams is just jamming cards and PorkBelly's trying to keep up, that is a recipe for disaster, because you can completely be thrown off of your game. And the same thing goes the other way around. If PorkBelly decides, hey, I'm going to take my time, I'm going to maybe rope a little bit more, maybe that throws off Cam's kind of tempo, as he's used to playing a little bit of a quicker game.
But look, I've not watched PorkBelly play Gwent before. This is the first time I've heard of PorkBelly in these qualifiers. I've not seen what he plays. I've not played against him, I don't think, on the ladder either. So certainly someone that's newer to the tournament scene compared to someone like Kams. Maybe this is just how PorkBelly plays. Maybe he is, in fact, the king. And I'll just get this score change as well that's on the board, as I just see. I've got the old score. I'll get that updated for us, guys. Because that's not what's happening here. We're not watching Shaggy versus Vlasilin anymore.
But look at some of these plays that have happened. We've seen PorkBelly already commit the Heat Wave. We've seen Selkirk hit the board. We've seen a War Chariot come and go. And these guys are absolutely jamming cards. But here comes the Orbs. It's going to give a little bit of love to the Elven Scribe. So getting some big boosts here. And, getting that kind of just game plan rolling on PorkBelly's side of things. Don't see Alzer in hand, but that's going to be a potential for a big round 2 push. Should he decide to go that direction, jam Alzer. Jam some of those orbs, the necromancy, the pact. There's a lot of options here still to come, and Kams is already out one dueler, but we do see Anseus in hand, we do see Viraxis in hand, so it's another situation of possibly NR drawing your gold cards and winning the game, and Kams is in a good spot for that.
Yeah, not a great use of the boiling oil here, but we do see Kams clicking his mage in the back to stay ahead and put more pressure onto PorkBelly. And look, the hand for PorkBelly is looking a little bit dodgy, and you can see why Kams was so aggressive at the start with this Selkirk, not messing around. The pact is enough for PorkBelly to get ahead, but this is not what you want in your hand. The Necromancy is not designed for this kind of a situation. You want those orbs in the graveyard. And of course, Gord is not great in round 1, all things considered. He does get a little bit better as the game goes on.
But you do have an interesting trade here. If PorkBelly decides to play the Necromancy, though I don't know exactly what's in the grave, Kams is in a situation where you have to potentially commit Anseus here, and that's your second dueling card in round 1. Winning it on even feels good, sure, but it's not the ideal situation. Not exactly what you want to be committing.
And this Hubert catches us off guard a little bit here, because that has a lot of extra points on the board. Hubert always surprising us. And there is the orbs as well, with the Seer Necromancy combo coming through. So PorkBelly showing why the Necromancy is in his deck. The orbs thinned from the deck while I was updating the score, I guess, because those caught me right off guard. And again, we don't have access to Observer mode, but here does come the Anseus, playing it in the front row to save a leader charge, using the order to get the duel. And now PorkBelly is in a situation where if he wants to win the round, or if he wants to try and win the round, he's going to have to play Gord and maybe his leader, and it might not even be enough still.
And we can't see how many point Gord actually is. Obviously, the leader charges can go through and pull all of your sentinels out, but imagine that. Round 1, Skoya versus Northern Realms will have seen Anseus, Selkirk. We see Gord come down for 10 points.
So Gord
comes
trading
down for 10 points.
For Viraxis. I mean, it's not the worst trade in the world, but you're still losing on even. You're really hoping here, if you are PorkBelly, that you do see something like a Viraxis. Imagine a Marine comes through or something like that. But the signs are probably there with the commitment from Kams, with this Anseus in the last turn, that it is got to be Viraxis. Otherwise, there might have been less of a commitment. Kams, definitely costing him a lot to win this one on even. But, you know, PorkBelly, the gourd being gone is definitely significant, as well as a lot of these orbs being removed as well.
That's it. And neither of these players are playing scenario. So that is sometimes how you can, for example, push through and win another round by dropping either Feign Death or Siege. And Kams is not going to take that win.
Wow.
Not going to win on even.
Okay. I was expecting the Varaxis to come through here. I really was. But seeing the gourd, I suppose that he feels as though he can win the long round and he's in a strong enough position. Now, Varaxis can be used still on Gerhardt. It can still be used on Shani as well. But look at this draw from PorkBelly. The Alza in hand. No need to go ADC into it. I'm not sure what ADC is going to pull now. But ADC is a spell card, of course. Does take the pass.
And it's a good thing. I mean, Kams was digging and digging and managed to pull the Banard student out, because having to commit Varaxis or Gerhardt on a dry pass where you could have spent Varaxis to win round one on even would have felt exceptionally bad. So we're going to have to see how this plays out. I don't know if Kams has an answer for Alzer here.
Yep, with no jewels left, we didn't see a Banard student in the front row developing enough damage to clean up the Alza either. Of course, you do have Zeals. The Bloody Baron, obviously targeted for Gord. The last say, not as important with Gord being gone. I suppose that's why Kams decided he was able to pass and just save the Varaxis. He would rather save Varaxis than win on even. Does go into a long round. But here is one potential way of trying to answer some of the engines of Kams here. And Alza just comes down straight away with no threat of any jewels. There's no need for any orbs. And this is about to get exciting because the Aneromancy, Christo, can pull an abundance of things. I'm talking She Who Knows. Okay, round 4 carryover, not very relevant. I'm talking Draug, which now has an order which can be used on humans, but no humans around, although Alza is a human, right? I'm talking Keltullis in the front row, Christo. I'm even talking Sunset Wanderers. So there's all sorts of things which could be about to happen with this Alza into Aneromancy. Arians. I'm excited.
I'm buckling up for this because this could go absolutely sideways. It can be absolutely wild. I am pumped to see what we get. You have to go straight into an Aneromancy, right? You can't give any type of chance for your opponent to know. We go Alzer's double cross first. That's got to feel a little bit bad pulling Fauve off of that.
Definitely, and that is a downside of this 8 sort of range. You think the higher you go, the more better options you're going to get. But actually at 8, you've got so many tutors. You've got Fauve, you've got John Natalis, these sorts of things. So honestly, there's lots of bad options there. 13 always has been the best, but Sunset Wanderers is the bad option. Here comes the Draug from the Aneromancy. There it is. I do believe Alza is a human, so he's going to turn into a Revenant at the end of it now. Doesn't look like any other humans. But, of course, Alza could make more. That's another human! The Traherne from the Orb. 2 Revenants available then from the Draug with the change in its order.
And unfortunately, that ends up pulling the Sentinel, which is not exactly the direction you want it to go there. But, hey, it works. That's what you get. Moving a body, that's going to be huge as well, because that student no longer can use their order ability on the front row. Here come the Revenants. The Draug changed not only a buff to Draug, but also a buff to Alza. Before, this would have just been a 7-point Draug. No option to click, because of course it was a deploy. But really cool to see the change to Draug added. And yeah, there was an option for PorkBelly, as you mentioned, chat, to go for the leader first, which would have thinned the Sentinels, guaranteeing Council onto Dunker, but wasn't taken. And Gerhardt comes down with an instant deploy. 3 options, the Pact, the Practice Makes Perfect, or the Teleportation just takes the Pact, putting the Gerhardt to 13, safe and therefore able to be used with Varaxis if Shani is removed. Which we're going to see Shani be removed through use of the leader ability, generating another Revenant, which is kind of nice. And since you've already pulled 1 Sentinel from your deck, you don't feel so bad if you aren't able to actually pull the other through your leader ability, because there likely will not be a small enough target to be able to do that again. I mean, you could theoretically ping your own Fauve if you wanted to generate another Revenant if you really wanted to, but probably not.
Yeah, very cool to see the precision strike with Revenants. It's like the leader that Revenants have always dreamed of,
Yes.
finally coming in unorthodox spots. Seeing Northern Realms in Scoia'tael decks does make me a little bit nervous, as it gives me flashbacks to the time I lost to Rashid on the ladder, who was playing Uma in Scoia'tael and rolled Ildico, and I lost. And that was a time when I was actually trying to compete, and it was not ideal. It gives me flashbacks. I don't like it.
Rashid ruining your day. That is too funny. Here we're gonna have the reset of Gerhardt. And we're gonna leave it hang out. There's no real way to answer that being at 13, so that should be fine. Just see her come down, get a little bit of love.
Just a 10-point game. It's really close. The Revenant's still available as well to be clicked. The leader ability available. And those caresses are not going to quite trigger their full vitality. There's going to be one left. Here does come the Bloody Baron. What will Gerhardt roll? He gets the point, which does not only mean that he's obviously going to be bleeding, but removes the vitality, which is more even important at this moment in time. Here's the Gerhardt options. Artifact Compression, the Will-O-Wisp, or the Thunder. What is the most points? Are we going to see a rare Will-O-Wisp? I don't think it's the time for it. It's going to be a Thunder to remove the Revenant here.
It will be a Thunder to remove the Revenant. Was that the best play? That's still 4 points. In reality, you're essentially losing one and the potential upside of more if you go, because you could actually rebuke. Yeah, you could rebuke, let's say, there you go. There's your 2. That's going to pull the other one out.
What an opening game. Brother Jams, the man, the myth, the legend, he loves jamming his cards. PorkBelly apparently does too. We're in for a bit of a roller coaster, a fast-paced series, because the first game is gone before we even knew it, and PorkBelly takes it 1-0 up. And this is what we want, guys. I love this.
45 seconds to get into the game. Love it. Absolutely love it. Kams coming back with that Northern Realms, going to be on blue against PorkBelly's Lined Pockets list. Now, this might be a bit of a challenge as well. I feel like Lined Pockets can end up being a pretty solid red coin list going up against Northern Realms here. So we'll have to see what kind of comes out on in round 1 again. If we see them go deep, trying to get some of those key pieces out, like we've seen in the past, especially when you're playing against Syndicate, you have to kind of figure out, how am I going to avoid some of that removal, or is everything just going to be picked right off of the board?
Yeah, and one thing I want to point out about Cam's deck here in Northern Realms is this inclusion of the War Chariot. It's a card I love because it gives you a second target of your Winch. Winch can be reduces the cooldown. It's a warfare card, so it does synergize with these ballistas as well. But it's so good with Shani. But if your Shani's removed, then the Winch does nothing. Well, look, this War Chariot gives you that extra option. Also a way of dealing with defenders. We've seen the ballista get poisoned and then given Veil, so no follow-up poison available. But it is still within range of Horson because it's at 8 points, 1 armor. So Horson can clean it up as the Flying Redanian flies out, and we continue on with this fast-paced action, Christo.
Look at how quickly that happened. The poison, the bounty, the Redanian, things are moving. Like you said, fast-paced, and just, you know, it's fast-paced, but you can see their game plan. You can see how, like, what they're committing to. It's so interesting to watch as they just continue to jam cards here. And you know, we can't even keep up. I know that, you know, on the tournament observer side, people are looking through decks, trying to show them off to us. And PorkBelly says, hey, here's my boat. I'll see you later.
Yeah, and this is something we see more often, more and more often as Gwent competitive esports continues to develop, is people making these plays from red coin where they just play 3 cards and then pass, and then really putting the pressure on your opponent. You do this when you're confident that you win a long round 3 and you're not scared of a bleed from your opponent, because Syndicate's great at that, right? Often, if you're getting bled, you just need to be able to remove your opponent's engines, and Syndicate has many ways of doing that. Look at this hand. You've got Horson, you've got Professor, you've got a Drill and a Freak Show, so an abundance of ways to remove engines. And for Kams, he's going to be very scared of going into a long round against all these removal tools. So definitely this pass from PorkBelly just puts the ball in Kams' court, yes, but he's confident here that he can win no matter what Kams tries to do.
And that's the thing about Syndicate. They have so many tools kind of throughout their list of provisions where if you're looking at, let's say, a Northern Realms list, well, you're focusing on your Anseus, you're focusing on your Firaxis, you're really pushing your high-end goals. But on Porkbelly side, dropping a Freak Show that's what, 7 provision card, a Drill that's a 7 provision card, you don't feel as bad committing some of these things, or even, in this case, dropping something like Horsa Jr. to clean up the board. So you have so many tools. And to your point, Specie, it's going to come down to, how effectively can Syndicate defend a bleed? And typically it's pretty darn efficient because of how they can go ahead and do things. And there's Shiny coming down. So that makes me feel on Kams' side like this bleed is going to continue for just a little bit longer.
Yeah, and I really like this decision from Kams because he's putting a lot of pressure on the board. He's got 3 potential removal targets. He does decide to click his mage in the back to buff Shani up and get her a little bit more difficult to remove. But 3 threats on the board all at once. And just trying to get some value from his engines. He's also, of course, got Amphibious Assault with the Echo value that has. So bleeding into this round does make some sense, and he's going to need, just like we saw Shaggy do, to get rid of some of these threats, get rid of the Drill, get rid of the Freak Show. And ultimately that means at some point his engines are going to die, but at least they're not going to be around for round 3.
Exactly. And so that bleed being put on the Adept in the front row, that means that Horson can come down now, clean up Shani and clean up the Adept as well. So again, trying to be as efficient and effective as possible as Porkbelly in using some of those cards. Sure, I'm going to commit Horson, but I'm going to remove 2 of your engines at the same time. So really going to be looking to protect as much as possible some of those stronger gold cards for later on in the game. There's Anseus coming out, getting a little bit of love. Going to take some points off of the board. So Kams is going full out with this bleed, going to look for a really, really short round 3. It seems like from the way he's playing right now.
Yeah, I'm loving it from Kams. His decision to click the Bannard tutor at the front, or student at the front, to kill the Furco before the bounty is obviously cleaned up and that order is removed. And not only that, he then uses Onsace in the back row with the leader charge to clean up the second Crown Splitter. So there's just 1 Crown Splitter left on the board. So that means Drill obviously not going to be popping off too much. So Cleaver would have to be committed. And that just gives Kams a lot of breathing room. But it's close. Porkbelly has a lot of coins in the bank, and it's only a 1-point game. But before Kams disappears from this round, he's absolutely going to want to use his Amphibious Assault Echo value. And Hubert is not far at all from being summoned either. And that's just going to be 5 extra points of tempo working in a similar way to Sunset Wanderers in these bleeds in round 2 to just keep making round 3 shorter, get some of these removal tools out while not losing on even, or at least trying not to lose on even.
And the next thing Porkbelly drops, and here comes the Witchfinder. So it had to be a big piece, but it had to be a big piece that synergizes with other things in hand. So, you've got Graydon. You want to use Graydon with the Witchfinder, theoretically. Your Cleaver and your Drill kind of line up. You do have the ability to give Bounty with Kurt. So you're trying to figure out, hey, what piece do I want to commit next? And how does that change how the rest of my round goes? Because now I have certain cards that I essentially need to commit next because they line up and synergize with what I've played so far. So you see the Bounty hitting Anseus. That gives a few options. You can always drop the Freak Show to start removing that. You can use Graydon to remove it. There's a lot going on here. But more importantly, Kams is staying ahead, and that gives him the opportunity to pass when he feels like he's seen enough.
But he's not ready to do it just yet because there's still all these threats that we talked about. And here comes Varaxis before Onsace is cleaned up, gets that extra little bit of control. Hubert comes flying out 23 points ahead, but Porkbelly has an abundance of coins, not only in the bank and as a leader, but also coins on the board. And here comes the very first of the abundance of threats that Syndicate has. Often, Northern Realms really struggles to deal with these kinds of cards. And the Freak Show comes down. Look, Kams can kill it, but it's not playing for much tempo to just play a oil to kill this thing. But not many coins left. And will Kams say that this is enough, or does he think he needs to get out more of these? It looks like he needs more.
That boiling oil is just so easy to spend here. Removes, still keeps you in a good spot. You're still 9 points up. So, if Porkbelly's trying to get ahead, gonna have to spend something big. And in this case, you're still not getting ahead. So there's the bounty on Varaxis, and this may need to be time for Kams to bow out here because that Bloody Baron's not doing. Never mind, ignore me. I was gonna say the Baron doesn't do much. Gerhardt, I mean, obviously it's a good click, but you need something left in a short round as well. And I feel like Gerhardt plays for so many points on deploy that you might want to save that for later.
Yeah, and Cam's playing it in a really interesting way. Like, the other thing to ask yourself is Cam's hand ever getting any better? Does he ever have a better opportunity to win? With such strong cards, he's maybe hoping that PorkBelly doesn't have a full gold hand. He might have missed things like Cleaver, might have missed things like the Drill. Of course, we can see that's not the case. But even then, he has his Assault ready for round 3. So at least he's going to be guaranteed 1 gold card. The casting contest working as a sort of engine play here as well, because this student cannot be removed just yet. But Kams has not got the option to pass, is going to want to click the order. Does he go for maybe a back row Baron to maximize points, or is he just going to go Gerhardt and then try and finally get his pass?
Well, Baron can have some value with something like Cleaver, for example, but there's not a lot else that's going to get very tall. I imagine there might be Sea Jackals and things like that as I go and try and pull up these deck lists, but that's there's one Sea Jackal in the deck, but nothing else really takes that giant boost. We've got Graydon already coming down, not using the tribute ability. But again, you mentioned it, Speci, up by 13 points here and still having the ability to click on Gerhardt. That's almost pushing for a, hey, can I maybe 2-0 this? Is there an opportunity here?
And let's just talk about this student in the back, this Aretusa student. She was played from Shani. She was clicked instantly, so her patience was developed in this short round 1. She boosted Shani out of removal range. She's then been used with the casting contest to use her order ability multiple times. And now, combined with a leader charge, Kams knows the cards available for PorkBelly, just gets this Gerhardt out of removal range and allows him to be a little bit more greedy and get potentially another casting contest from Gerhardt. I do think that's going to be the thing he's looking for. In comes the Baron. We might see the reset on the Hubert, we do. And we do find the casting contest as well. So maximum points here. Do we see the buff on the Hubert to try and take it out of removal range? No Graden available, just make things a little bit more difficult to clean up this bounty. We do. It's a 23-point game. There's lots of coins available. Kams has Assault for round 3. Can PorkBelly do this in 1 card, or will it require both?
I cannot imagine. I mean, my math is not nearly as strong as these players, but I cannot imagine this happening in 1 card.
The bounty is going to be collected.
Yes.
Drill is not spending as efficiently as it should because, you know, he used again the duel and the damage from the Banard student to kill the Furco. So that really is relevant here. And look at that. It's not enough. The Drill is gone. The Cleaver is gone. It's masterfully played from Kams, playing it to perfection and not even giving PorkBelly that full coin carryover. 3 leader charges, 3 coins in the bank. So 6 coins carried over for Syndicate. But Northern Realms has its Amphibious Assault. Let's go to the top decks.
Ooh, baby. So we've got no Witchfinder, no Professor, no Cleaver, no Justice, no Junior, no Graydon. I don't really know if PorkBelly has anything but bronzes in his list. Looks like bronzes. And, you know, just Amphibious Assault in and of itself might be enough to win this game borderline single-handedly. There's Selkirk to just help things out a little bit, but this has got to feel good if you're on Kams' side of things.
And this is why Amphibious Assault is the best Northern Realms card, and it will be for the foreseeable future. He has not used it in round 1. It wasn't forced out of him. He used it in round 2, and now he's just got this extra gold card for round 3. Here comes the Sea Jackal, but the Selkirk, if it can be boosted high enough, could potentially remove it. And using the Assault to pull a Marine, and using the casting contest to boost the Marine, this Selkirk can get very, very tall very quickly indeed.
This is going to be wild last play because that Marine gets boosted, gives the boost, still not going to be good enough. That dip in the Pontar is going to come down, do some damage, give more coins for an additional boost.
And it damages the Selkirk down further as well. So this Selkirk is just not tall enough to duel the Sea Jackal. So the Selkirk is forced to duel a ship. And it's not enough for Kams. He played it perfectly, but he still loses. The Sea Jackal proving too much for the Northern Realm Selkirk to deal with. Bloody Baron, of course, would have won it. But the Sea Jackal going so tall that Selkirk could not answer it. There was no Zeal available for Selkirk. And that 1 leader charge was the difference between a win and a loss.
My gosh. So round two, Beta Gwent, where your leader essentially was a card. And to
Absolutely.
your point, Spessy, sometimes it's worth, hey, let me take this loss on even. Let me keep my leader because that's going to equate to a card later on in the game and being able to line that up and make the best choice around it. So, to your point, I think people undervalue it. It's only 2 points. Oh, I always use my leader charge with my Selkirk or my Anseus or whatever the case may be. But sometimes it comes down to just being smart about it. And these players, both PorkBelly and Kams, have gone through these scenarios over and over again and just have, mastered those tiny little plays. And I think we've seen it here. Kams is no slouch, and PorkBelly coming out up 2-0 in the first two games is absolutely incredible. So this is going to be an exciting next couple of games, or maybe next game, because Kams is back. It's up against the wall here.
Yeah, and if we think back to the previous game as well, the previous series, we were in a similar position where Shaggy's last deck was Skelliger to get through. He was 2-0 up, and Vlastilin in this situation queued his Skelliger on the coin going second. Going first, right? Whereas here, Kams, he's got his Nilfgaard ready to go, going second, and yeah, the Skelliger deck definitely better going first on paper. So the next matchup, is, if we get there, is going to be the most important because he's going to be able to play this deck 3 times here, PorkBelly, only 1 time going second. So it'll be very interesting to see if we get there what deck Kams queues. Because look, Kams is 2-0 down, but the luxury is there's only one thing that PorkBelly can queue. So he can hand pick the matchups on the coin that he wants. He gets to decide what deck he plays on what coin. So that is one slight advantage going in for Kams. But look, of course, you'd much rather be 2-0 up. Absolutely, you would. And this game, getting off, no surprises to a rather fast start, Christo. No room for a breath.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. Your advantage is the fact that you get to decide, what your matchup is. But the downside is you have no room for error. You're walking on a tightrope and you need to play these 3 games perfectly. And again, with the level that PorkBelly has showed us, and again, just being a little bit newer on the scene, somebody we're less familiar with, we didn't know exactly what to expect. But jamming cards, keeping up with Kams, always impressive. And Kams using the leader ability on lemons and is going to, are we going to see a coup on that?
Yeah, so coup available on either Lemmings or Coral or even the Raging Bear, because this Furcat, every time a special card is played, is applying a status. So we do see it on the Coral. Not exactly an abundance of, there's not going to be something like a Skirm or anything like that to discard if you're Nilfgaard, but just snapping up the pass straight away here. PorkBelly, we do go into round number 2. Kams having committed a leader charge. Definitely, as we talked about, that is expensive. That is just less points for round 2 and round 3. Only 1 left. Now, the locks here, there's not really anything you want to lock against this Skelliger Reckless Fire deck, but it is so useful. Again, it's just 3 points, and also for setting up things like your coup, and then even you could even set up your Junod with a leader charge if you are cooing or briberying into one. So definitely a commitment. Sunset Wanderers also still available here for PorkBelly as Skelliger, which is just going to be some extra points in round number 2 if Kams does decide to bleed. But Nilfgaard in a long round does seem quite intimidating. So Kams now at the Magic 7. We'll have to wait and see if he decides to pass as the ball is in his court, if we're going to go to a long round 3, or if he's going to decide to bleed this matchup.
And you mentioned before the Sunset Wanderers. That might be a situation where Kams might want to get that card out here. The ability to draw cards with things like Burna is going to continue to give it a little bit more runway. So again, it's one of those things where Kams has to decide, hey, can I win in a long round with my engines? Am I a little bit worried about the control aspects of this SK list? But again, looking at PorkBelly's hand, you've got the heat wave, you've got some damage, but you don't necessarily have the tall punish tools that you might want to remove all of the engines. So I think either way is an absolute possibility. Are we seeing Maxi? Yeah, this is Maxi coming down, just kind of sorting out the third round draws for PorkBelly. Probably expecting to see a pass here, and I mean a handful of gold cards on Kams' side. Probably won't see much better, and has to drop the Burna to make sure that the Wanderers do not come out here.
Yeah, and that is you touched on it just before. Wanderers is a great card, but it's even better in decks where you can manipulate your hand and draw cards. We see it in Tactical Decision with Snowdrop. Not only does it increase the distance Sunset Wanderers travels to the edge of the world, therefore having more points, but it also just allows you to manipulate it to keep it in your hand. If you didn't have a Burner here or a Scald, this Sunset Wanderers would have been thinned, and that is not what you want to be doing when you only need a couple of points to take the round.
Exactly. So that, that might have also been part of Kams's plan. Again, Sunset Wanderers gives that information to your opponent because you do see it move, and seeing where Sunset Wanderers ended up, Kams knew that if I pass and they don't have the ability to draw cards here, that Wanderer is ending up on board. And I'm really happy with my not really a bleed by getting that card out on a pass. So that must feel real good. We're see Scald come out, draw another one.
Yeah, not ideal.
But there are 2 discard cards in hand, so it does feel pretty good.
Hey, it is ideal. You're right. It's like the perfect thing after having committed the burner, the coral we saw in round 1 as well. Yeah, absolutely. This burner was forced out as there was no scouts available there. So in fact, a great draw. And again, these scouts, not only are they playing for 8 points, with 1 thinning combined with the skirms, but they're also just adding an extra point onto the Sunset Wanderers. So quite comparable to Courier onto something like a Mage Assassin. We talk about how good Mage Assassins are, but the Skirmishers absolutely in the same bracket here. 2 of the best cards on paper in the whole game.
And that was a heads-up play as well by PorkBelly to go ahead and say, you know what, I have a discard card left in my deck. I'm going to go and or a draw card, right? A Scald in my deck. I'm going to keep that discard card. I'm going to keep both Morkvarg, and I'm also going to keep the Skirmisher because I'm feeling pretty good about drawing into that. And here we are where that is actually the case. So absolutely pretty wild to see that come through. Now, we did see what was left in PorkBelly's deck. Unfortunately, you do have a Trial of the Grasses and you do have the Totem. So a couple gold cards hanging out here. There comes one into hand through the Wanderers, so feeling pretty good about that. Also, there was the opportunity for Quen to brick by drawing a card because you did only have 1 Bear Witcher left in the list, and that's what Quen wants to go get.
Yeah, the spying status applied here to the Sunset Wanderers. That's not to set up Terra Nova, because that would be a little bit weak, but it is in fact to set up the Vincent. And Axie here being used for the best possible purpose to free the Fish Flapper. The Fish Flapper had been put behind bars. It had been locked at one point, but now the Fish Flapper back to his 7 power. So a pretty nice Axie here as Vincent cleans up Sunset Wanderers. Totem jammed. The players just not pausing for breath. They are just zacking the cards in this long round 3 here.
Absolutely. And, Kams has not had a chance to commit as many Assimilate engines as he would like, though there is another one. That feels pretty decent.
Yeah, that's beautiful. This is why Vigo is so powerful. And we also talked in the previous set when we watched Shaggy about this totem just getting worse and worse as it goes on. And this is why, look, both parts of the totem disrupted in just 1 turn with the Joachim and the Informant, and the Vigo working just like a Bralthans, pulling an Informant, having an Assimilate tag, just a fantastic card. It does come at a deck building cost because, you want to try and minimize the amount of bronze units you have, so you end up putting a lot of bronze specials in, but with things like Diplomacy being just 4 provisions, Vigo too good not to include.
Oh, absolutely. And things like Diplomacy, look, at the end of the day, 4 provisions and they trigger Assimilate. That is what your deck wants to do. It wants to establish engines. Vigo can give you a copy of an engine, give you a copy of something that procs Assimilate, gives you all of the tools in the book that you could possibly want. And then, you're also going to jam up your opponent's board at this rate. You're not going to have time to fill it up, but again, another engine gets established through Joachim, and that feels really, really good here.
And we do have a 6-point game, 4 cards apiece. However, PorkBelly does have his leader available, although looking at the card quality, I think it's fair to say Kams has the advantage in that big moment with the bribery. It finds Hjalmar, it finds Axie, it finds Quen, a couple of Witchers as well as Hjalmar. You can't really complain with your selection opportunities here. Quen not going to be taken, as I don't think there's any Witchers unless Invo has been used to find one. Axie, not bad reset. Hjalmar, you might have some things. Axie or Hjalmar being the big decision. But let's not forget, not only is this playing as a gold card, but it's also triggering Assimilate. And the Raging Bear as well.
Oh, yes, you copied the Raging Bear. You have that in your grave. You also, because of the spying on Hjalmar, can do it again, essentially, with Arto. You have a 6 still in there. You have Coral, which is still, a good amount of points because between the Arto, the Assimilate engine, the Hjalmar, and then your damage, you are absolutely putting points on the board with those engines. So here we go. Arto coming down.
Terra Nova is someone to be absolutely feared. And there is the Raging Bear on Raging Bear. Not something you like to see. Animal cruelty, but, you know, it's just a bear fight at this point. It's fine. Hjalmar getting involved. The Bear Witcher as well comes to support his friend, as well as the full leader charge from PorkBelly, just leaving Quen in his hand. He's 6 points ahead with his best card left. But Brathens and an Informant with an abundance of Assimilate engines available. Vigo has been removed from the board, so that's one less Assimilate engine. But the Torturer, the Terra Nova, the Brathens, it looks like it's Kams' game to win. And this is why Nilfgaard is something to be feared in a long round 3.
Absolutely. And, you know, we saw the Axie come down early, but look at the Mage Torturer. Look at the extra 12 points on that.
Yeah.
That would have felt pretty decent as an Axie. I don't know if it would have made the difference in this game, but, you know, Cam's coming back, taking this game, making a series out of it.
Right now, that is going to be played during the first month of the final set of the expansion. So Open 4 is going to be really exciting for sure.
That's always nice to see. I'm always a big fan of, you know, let's jump into the tournament scene. Let's see how it plays out, especially when it falls in a time frame where, like you were mentioning, right after that third part of the expansion, maybe the players haven't had as much time to test as they would have liked. Maybe there are some things that are still, you know, undiscovered. The meta is a little bit more open. And so you see more variety. You see more players bringing different things as opposed to, yeah, we've played this patch for a little while. An event like this where, you know, maybe you're seeing the same 5 decks shuffled around these top players and they're playing 4 of those 5 kind of thing.
Yeah, and we spoke as well earlier on that Kams does have the luxury of choosing the coin matchups. He has 1 game left to be played on blue coin if he hopes to win this. This is the red coin game we talked about, the only red coin game that PorkBelly is going to have with this SK deck. And Kams deciding that Northern Realms is his best chance at winning on blue coin in this series. So I believe his last deck is going to be Flurry as well. I don't have the deck list open just in front of me with my OBS and Discord situation, but I believe it is Flurry.
The last deck is Flurry.
It's a Portal Fish Flappers, isn't it?
It is. It is. We have not seen it yet, but Portal Fish Flappers on red. I mean, that's some points. That is some points that can hit the board and really throw things on its side, throw plans on its side on red coins. So I think, you know, we saw Astelin trying to bring the SK on blue when he had the opportunity to pick what direction he wanted to go with his deck. So I think Cam's going the other way, deciding, hey, I'm going to hang on to this SK deck for red coin where it flourishes, and let's just try and get this Northern Realms list through.
Definitely. Historically, it's always been a mirror matchup you prefer to go second in. Round control can be really important, and obviously that threat of winning on even with the leader charges, especially if Kams is going to find that portal. But before that happens, Kams needs to win with Northern Realms against SK, and, you know, Northern Realms, not one of the most popular factions, I think it's fair to say. It's not a Nilfgaard, it's not a Syndicate, it's not a Scoia'tael. Cam's deciding not to bring Scoia'tael, I believe, or at least we haven't seen as much Scoia'tael in this, and that's kind of an interesting thing. A big reason behind that is while Scoia'tael is a great ladder deck, it is somewhat easily targetable. People can build lineups to try and beat Scoia'tael with things like Hyperthin that just outpoint it. So definitely interesting, again, to see the tournament meta being slightly different from that you might expect to see on the ladder.
Exactly. And the tournament meta typically will be a little bit more control heavy because you can kind of game plan, hey, what is my opponent going to do? How can I react to that? And when you're in a situation, and we talked about it when we saw the Scoia versus Syndicate game, Syndicate, as an example, has a ton of control options, especially on that smaller to mid-level damaging 3-4. And that's what Scoia'tael needs to stick, right? They need those elves to stick the seers and whatnot. So if you're removing those cards very easily, very efficiently, you're going to be in a really tough spot. So I can understand why you maybe want to shy away from that in an open decklist tournament type of meta. But it's definitely, and we saw it with Shaggy doing it, it's definitely a list that can still pump out a ton of points.
It's another situation, Christo. It's been the theme of the day, really, where people, when they're going second, are just playing 3 cards and passing. Now, there's a problem for Kams, because he seems to have a vampire in his hand. He seems to be stalking Priscilla, who isn't in his deck, but Hubert, not where you want to see him, to be completely honest with you. And he does still have his Assault available, so would expect at least to see that. But Xavier Lemmings, working like a little bit of a chunkier squirrel, does mean that maybe Assault isn't going to be definitely played by Kams here.
And don't forget that, and we see Kams hovering over Shani a little bit, but Lemons can also come down and do some damage to the graveyard in the way of what Shani can bring back. So Kams is sort of in a situation where I think the AA comes out, does some thinning, gets you some good points on the board, but past that, you're in a situation where you may have to commit something a little bit bigger than what you would typically like. You know, you've got a handful of gold cards otherwise, not great proactivity. So there's Lemons coming down, going to eat that AA.
And yeah, as you mentioned, this is a real threat because Lemmings can continue to eat, working almost like an engine. A card that we've seeing play a lot more recently due to things like the orbs. But Shani, you've also got Melusine who can show up occasionally. There's definitely lots of things that Lemmings can deal with. As Kams has now passed that magic 7-card threshold, which does mean he is invested in the bleed. And if PorkBelly can get ahead of him here, is going to be threatening to go ahead on cards. But Kams, despite the Hubert mishap in hand, is continuing to push. Does just mean he's going to have 5 points less for this round, and Hubert isn't also, his counter doesn't tick down when he's in hand, so Hubert's just going to be 5 points wasted, so basically 8 provisions wasted in the deck. I guess you could say 4 provisions because it could just be a 4 provision card. You can kind of assume that 4 provision cards are free in Gwent, and then every provision extra costs you, so basically wasting 4 provision Kams in this matchup is definitely not ideal.
And that's the unfortunate part about this. If the ticker were to continue to drop and end up, you know, back in the deck and one click would bring him out, hey, it doesn't feel as bad. You can essentially save him for later.
It would almost be good, right?
Yeah, exactly. But in this scenario, you're going to end up being a little bit short on time in a short round 3 where you're not going to be able to get him out. So we're going to have a little vampire just hanging around, sitting in the deck, not doing a whole heck of a lot.
And remember, this is Kams up against a wall. This is the losers bracket semi-final. The loser is out of the top 16 qualifier. That means their last chance for Open 4 and potentially Masters. I know Kams can get there on crown points, but you know, you really would like to get into Open 4, not only to be at Open 4, but also increase the odds of you getting to Masters, which is not even far away, going to be coming sometime later on in the year. And the loser of this is out of the top 16, and their last chance to get into Open will be the top 64 with a bunch more players. Kams passes. Hubert might still have a chance. We can't see the counter on him. No leader charges available. That can be another way to trigger it. The 4-point mega scope combined with the leader charge. But look, Sunset Wanderers, as usual, putting in some serious work. It just is enough to get PorkBelly there as we go to a sort of, you know, a longer round 3. Could be, you know, a little bit longer. It's going to be an 8-card round 3. Certainly not a short one. Hubert might just have enough time to be thinned, and that 5 extra points could make all the difference.
Yeah, Kams has to feel pretty good about this, getting Wanderers out and having a good amount of time in round 3. 6 clicks left on that Hubert. Might be a little bit tough, but looking at the hand, there are a lot of order abilities in there, especially when you have that ballista that goes turn after turn. So that's a good option there. Unfortunately, Kams manages to grab the Envoy as the last card, which is not exactly what you want. Lots of artifacts in hand, though, for PorkBelly to go ahead and verify a little bit later.
2 clicks already. That means Hubert's on 4. Now, one upside of the Envoy, look, it's not a gold card. It's not a great bronze, but it does have an order cooldown working in a similar way to the Ballista. So you never know. That one little bit of order, you could even value this Envoy as like a 10-point card if you can play it in the back row, if that's the difference. But with the Ballista still being on the board, it does look like Hubert is not going to be too much of a problem here. For Kams to thin as the Bannard student comes in the front row.
So this is interesting because now looking at the side of PorkBelly, you're going to want to try and remove that student. You're going to hope to click with your leader, and then you get the Bear Witcher out. That should do it. There we go. Gets that click going. Misses completely.
Jeez. It's not ideal, is it? It's not great.
Wow, that is not what you wanted at all.
It was the worst possible combination, right? You're almost guaranteed to kill one unless that exact situation happens. So both engines sticking for Kams, and it was looking to be a pretty tough situation for Kams. It might still be, but that does give him some hope.
Absolutely. So, you know, Quinn goes, gets out that Bear Witcher, gonna finish off the student. Doesn't feel good, but gets done. You're gonna click on Heron, and you're gonna be able to verify it. So there's a 25-point swing here, and that Envoy comes down for a sad little 5 with Hubert already out. Gerhardt's going to have to do some work, and Varaxis is going to have to help him out. Unfortunately, Gerhardt coming down, I would only imagine that heat wave is going to bite him and make Varaxis just a little bit worse here.
Yeah, and it's a 28-point game before this casting contest, which is going to get it a little bit closer, I think. Verification comes through. It's not looking great for Kams. Is Kams out at the final hurdle? This was probably the most important matchup because he would have had those fish flappers on red coin in the mirror matchup. This was the big one we talked about. Gerhardt comes through. Does Kams have to greed it? He feels like he might still have a chance without greeding the Gerhardt here. He takes the pact. He's 14 points down. Heatwave's going to play for 11. Varaxis in the front row. It's just not going to be enough. And Kams has been out-jammed by PorkBelly here. And wow, what a performance. What a quick series. And it's 3-1 to PorkBelly. And it's going to be PorkBelly versus Vlastelin to book their place in Gwent Open number 4.